Buenas tardes, good afternoon, bienvenidos and welcome. Just a few housekeeping rules before we get started. All of our participants this afternoon are muted. If you're having any difficulties, please use the chat to communicate with us. And if you want to submit any questions for the panelists, please use the Q&A feature as you see on your screen. So I'll start by saying Happy Hispanic Heritage Month. On behalf of the Progreso Latino Fund and the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, we want to thank you and we want to thank our panelists for joining us this afternoon. For more than 2 decades, 22 years to be exact, the Progreso Latino Fund has inspired Latin philanthropy in our community. And we exist to convene in the way that we're doing today, to lift, educate, to support, promote, and to celebrate the Latin community. Our mission is to empower a diverse Latin community in the Greater New Haven region through education, leadership, culture, and philanthropy. This year, PLF aligned its efforts with the Women and Girls Fund as they celebrate 30 years of working to improve the quality of life for women and girls in our region through education, research, advocacy, and most importantly, by encouraging women's philanthropy. Our grants this year were made to 3 Latina-led and serving organizations that are providing wraparound support services to Latinas in the workforce. That's just one other way in which PLF does its work. I want to start by thanking Liana Garcia, the staff liaison to the Progreso Latino Fund, and Carmen Burgos to the Progreso Latino Fund advisory board members for their vision and their support. Together, with the help of the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, we're able to present you with this incredible, powerful group of Latina leaders. This is the beginning of a conversation that we hope you will continue to have with others in your circle. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome and thank our esteemed panelists as they join me in today's conversation, Latina Leadership Unfiltered, Strength, Culture, and the Systemic Truth. Please join me in welcoming Liany Arroyo, Fany DeJesús Hannon, hello, and Ellie Nieves. Welcome, welcome. If you could please just introduce yourselves, tell us where you are and why you're joining us in this conversation today. Liany, we can start with you. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Jadi, for that introduction. I'm really excited to be here. I'm Liany Arroyo. I am a Connecticut native, as a friend once christened me, a Bridgeport Rican, born and raised in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Very proud of that fact. Currently, have spent the last 8 years in Hartford. I left when I went for college. Went to Wellesley College and then to Columbia University for my master's, and then was all over the country working, and made my way back 8 years ago to work for the former Mayor Luke Bronin as Director of Health and Human Services. It was an adjustment to come back, but it was great to be back in the community that had nurtured me in Connecticut with the Latinos and Latinas and Latina community that was there for me throughout my formative years. And so I'm really happy to be here. And currently I'm the director of the Connecticut Urban Opportunity Collaborative, which is a partnership between the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, Fairfield County's Community Foundation, and the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven, working on ensuring social mobility for communities of color in New Haven, Hartford, and Bridgeport through direct cash assistance. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Liany. Ellie?
Hi, my name is Ellie Nieves, and I currently serve as the Head of Strategic Public Policy and Assistant General Counsel for Government Affairs for a Fortune 300 company. And in that role, I lead the development of public policy strategies on emerging issues essential for driving innovation and advocacy. I have been focusing primarily these days on artificial intelligence regulation and also critical issues shaping business strategy. I'm also the founder of Leadership Strategies for Women, LLC, which is a leadership development firm and I focus on helping high achieving women to show up, speak up, and step up in their careers.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you. Doctora Fany DeJesús Hannon, welcome.
Muchísimas gracias. Buenas tardes, good afternoon. Thank you, Yadi. It's so great to be here with each and one of you. I'm Fany DeJesús Hannon. I was born and raised in Honduras. I speak, English and Spanish, and I'm an aficionado of Brazilian Portuguese. I use she, her, hers, ella, ella pronouns. I'm a product of the United States higher education system. I went to Smith College. I'm also a graduate. I graduated from Miami-Dade Community College. Then I went to Smith College, and I pursued my master's at the University of Connecticut and my doctorate at New England College. What I do right now, I live my life with purpose. I'm the Dean of Students at the University of Connecticut. I am the first Latina, but not the last one. That is my goal, to make sure that more Latinos come, to be the Deans of Students at UConn. And I love what I do. I'm in charge of 30,000 students in our university. And I'm looking forward to be here, yes, and continue empowering the next generation of nuestra gente. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you all. See, I couldn't have introduced you with that much enthusiasm, right? We're all so excited about the work that we do, and thank you so much for joining us. And so we've heard a little bit about your journey, each of you. And so if I could just get us started, tell us a little bit about, where did you want to go and how did you arrive at where you are today?
Happy to start and then hand it off. So when I was a little girl, I thought that I was going to be a brain surgeon because as I tell folks, like every good Puerto Rican girl growing up in a family that hadn't experienced higher education at the time, you were a doctor, lawyer, or teacher. And so I was going to be a doctor, even though I argued a lot and folks said I probably should have been a lawyer, but I was going to be a doctor. And part of that had to do with growing up without a lot of access to healthcare and sort of having periods where we didn't have insurance and waking up one morning and not finding my grandmother there because she had been rushed to the hospital. And so those things sort of all came together for me. And so I was like, well, I'm going to be a doctor. And I had to pick the hardest thing that there could be. So I was going to be a brain surgeon. And that's sort of how I set up my education, right? My mom got me into a magnet school, one of the first magnet schools in Bridgeport, made sure I learned Spanish through that magnet school because she wanted to make sure I was bilingual, and took science classes when I went to high school. I am a graduate of Bridgeport Public Schools. And so did all of that until I got to college. And that's when I realized that, unfortunately, even though my education was great, it was lacking in some areas, and it was lacking as it related to science, and organic chemistry slapped me back into reality. And I decided that it was not what I wanted to do anymore, but it was definitely an interest of mine to be related to the health field. And as I got older and sort of went through that process of high school, I also started recognizing that public policy was very important in how people can access healthcare and how they can take care of their health. And I discovered this thing called public health. And at that point, my world sort of was shocked. Like it was a boom, a sonic boom for me, because I was letting go of something that had defined who I was for many, many years. I was going to be a doctor. I was going to be la doctora de la familia, the one that was going to help move the family forward. So a lot of pressure that was on me to do that. And I had to let all of that go and disappoint family members, but at the same time, find what I thought made sense for me. And so I did that, graduated doing psychology and economics at Wellesley, doing public health at Columbia, and found my way into government work, nonprofit work, and really have fashioned a career that's been based on both direct service to the community. I've worked in implementing programs, tobacco control, teen pregnancy, STIs, and also doing the policy work, going on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., reading bills from at the time, a congressional representative who was writing a bill around teen pregnancy. And when I read it, I was like, hey, what happens to a state like Connecticut? Well, if I hadn't been there some of the things that would have been done would have affected the New England states negatively because our rates look really low on teen pregnancy. But when we look at certain communities, they're actually pretty high. So like having those, being able to be in those spaces because of who I was and the experience that I had had growing up in Connecticut, being Puerto Rican, Latina, helped me use that in ways that were really positive. And so my family got over me not being a doctor. My mom is over that now. She still doesn't truly understand what I do, except that I deal with politicians and that I try to make things better. But I will say that the work that I did during COVID really opened her eyes to better understand that, no, I'm not a doctor, but I'm still related to healthcare, and I'm doing all the things that I said I was going to do when I was a kid in just a different way.
What a journey. What a journey. Thank you for that. Ellie or Fany?
Sure. I'm happy to go next. So I'm also a Puerto Riqueña, New Yorker specifically, born and raised in the South Bronx, product of a mother who was a community activist and worked for a New York State legislator. My father was a security guard at Rockefeller Center, and by night, he was also a newscaster at a Spanish language radio station. When I grew up, I thought I wanted to be a journalist, and I went to Fordham University and studied journalism, inspired by what I was doing in high school, actually. When I was in high school, I would write for the high school newspaper, and I wrote on everything from how horrible the school lunch was to the police brutality that I was experiencing outside the perimeters of the high school. And that inspired me to want to write about injustice and social movements. So when I went to college, I did a lot more writing. And then as I immersed myself into journalism, I wanted a bigger platform. So I decided that I wanted to run for office. After being with my mom, working for a legislator for all those years, I decided that that's what I wanted to do. So that's what led me to go to law school. I figured that if I was going to make laws, I should understand the law. So I went to law school for 3 years, graduated, immediately started working for political campaigns and getting to know all of the local legislators in my community. I ended up running a New York City mayoral campaign, also worked as a political director on a presidential campaign, and then went on to serve as general counsel to the Bronx Borough president. And somewhere along the line, in addition to my passion for wanting to engage in public service, I was also saddled with a lot of law school debt. And that actually was one of the catalysts that helped me to join corporate America. But I joined an industry where I really am passionate about. I'm in the life insurance industry. And many of you know, if you've ever lost someone and had a life insurance policy, how that life insurance policy served to help serve as a social safety net almost when you are in a grieving position and when families need financial support the most. So I'm very happy to be in that industry and also doing something that I love, which is public policy. And these days working on things like artificial intelligence. As I was coming up in politics, I met a lot of women who were very interested in also climbing up the ranks. And I ended up mentoring a lot of women. I ended up getting certified as a coach, and that's what led me to launch my second passion, which is helping women to get ahead in their careers via my company, Leadership Strategies for Women.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Ellie. Fany?
1 hour is not enough, everyone. I feel so inspired, not enough. So I think, my Hondureña mom probably also talked to Liany's mom because she also wanted to have a doctor in the family. So I came to the United States when I was 20 years old. I didn't speak the language. So everything that you hear now, it's because I soy una luchadora. I'm a fighter and I don't give up. So I was raised by two wonderful parents. My mom, educator in Honduras, my dad, an agriculture engineer. We came to the US in 1996 with my three sisters, so the six of us. So I love education. There's something that my parents always say, if you wanna get anything in your life, you have to pursue your education. But also they told me to appreciate learning, and that's what I love the most. So learning new things. So, I am a product, like I said before, of a community college in Miami. Then I got a full scholarship to go to Smith College in the cold weather in Massachusetts, because here I was, La Hondureña, challenging herself and said, no, wanna leave Florida, let me go to Massachusetts. And I loved my 3 years there in Massachusetts. Then I met my husband, born and raised in Connecticut, never left the state, fall in love. And next thing I know, I got into the higher education and master's degree program at the University of Connecticut. I'm going to tell you this. I wanted to come to UConn just to pursue my master's, but opportunity really knocks to my door. And a job was offered to me, not into the higher education and student affairs side of the house. But when I got the phone call, I appreciated that my former mentor said, you're good for this job. So I became the manager of student and young alumni relations at the UConn Foundation. And even though it was not student affairs, I said to myself, there's learning in here. So let me do this job. So I was there for 4 years, but prior to that, in my years as a master's student, I had the honor and the privilege to be the graduate assistant of the Puerto Rican Latin American Culture Center here at UConn. So full circle, 4 years, fast forward, I knew that I wanted to do something new, something different, but I also was ready for it. And once again, another phone call. Hey, Fany, PERLAC is seeking for a director. This is your time. You need to apply. And by the way, that's the acronym of our wonderful, Culture Center. And I did apply. And I said to myself, okay, I'm bringing my everything. And PERLAC became my home away from home. And I'm gonna probably get emotional because I love the Culture Center so very much. I love our Latino students. And in my 10 years, oh my God, here's Jocelyn Tlacomulco. Thank you, Jocelyn. I love you too. And so in my 10 years as a director, I infiltrated myself in every single department that you can ever imagine, not only at the STORES campus, but also at every single campus that the university had. I was there. Sometimes I was invited to be in those conversations to represent our self-identified Latinx students. Some other times I made my way into, because I was not invited, but I knew I needed to be there. And next thing I know, I received another phone call by the end of the fall of 2022, when somebody said, hey, we need a new dean, and we believe that you can do this job. And I said, and I was asked, are you ready for this? And I said, I've been waiting for this. I am ready. And it's been 3 years that I became the dean of students. And I really love what I do, everyone. I really love being here, not only for our own Latinx students, but I am very student-oriented. What really leads me, what really gives me purpose every single morning when I get up is to know that I believe that we're making a change in the life of our students. And I'm very passionate about that, not only at STORES, but also in all of our campuses. So I self-declare as the Dean of Students for all of the campuses at the university. This position historically has been STORE-centric, and I didn't want to do that anymore because I don't have a campus attached to my title. Simply, I am the Dean of Students at the University of Connecticut. And that's how my journey continues.
Wepa.
Wepa.
What incredible stories, accomplishments. It's incredible to hear, right? There's like these little seeds that are planted early on, and they bloom to be these amazing women with careers that are unmatched. And I know that it's not by chance that we've gotten here, right? And the truth is that we came to have an unfiltered conversation in the way that I think about the good, the bad, and the ugly of what sort of all of those stories and movement sort of took you through. And so if we could, right, let's talk a little bit about what are some of the systemic barriers that you encountered or cultural norms that were challenged along the way to this incredible level of success that the three of you have been able to accomplish.
I'm happy to go first. When we think about some of the challenges that we as Latinas have faced in the past, one of the things that comes to mind immediately are the cultural pressures and the expectations that we put on ourselves as a community. I think one of the pressures is, to get married and to start a family, right, at the very basic level. In the past, Latinas have, faced judgment from family if they put their careers ahead of family. When I got married over 20 years ago, my mother-in-law, who was a stay-at-home mom who had raised 5 children, had a very difficult time relating to me. Here I was a Latina lawyer at a Fortune 300 company who also had her own business. And I was traveling several times a month. So I wasn't home to feed her son. And it wasn't enough, right? That I didn't have this passion for cooking that she had to be in the kitchen, right? And to this day, todavía no sé cómo hacer el arroz, right? It's not a thing still. But I love my mother-in-law, and she has come a very long way accepting my very modern Latina ways. But there was certainly this strong cultural expectation about the role that I should have been playing in the household. And I think that that's one of the items that as Latinas, we need to overcome. And it's not necessarily something that's coming from outside. Sometimes it's actually coming from within. It's coming from within our own culture.
Happy to jump in next. Definitely, the family expectations, I think, is a big deal. I started early, like, what was my family expecting from me? My mom and dad got divorced when I was very, very young, and so was my mother and my grandmother. They both worked in factories, right? And so one worked during the day, one worked at night, so that there was always someone home for my brother and I. And the expectation was, my grandfather was a migrant farm worker. We forget that Puerto Ricans were migrant farm workers in the Northeast. And so he picked tobacco, he picked strawberries and apples in central Connecticut and Western Mass, and he brought his family over in 1956. So 55, and we've been here for 59, sorry, so now 66 years. And the expectation was that we were going to go to college and we were going to move a family. Like, we were going to lift a family out of where they were. And so that meant certain things that had to be done. And so that was a challenge when I told my mother I wanted to go away to college. It was, yes, I want you to go away, because education was always very important. She worked very hard to get me into schools that she thought would be helpful for me from Head Start to going to Multicultural Magnet. Yes, I have to give my elementary school a shout out there. Jadi and Fernando both went there with me. So they were also support systems. I think on the network that we had as young people, were also support systems, but that whole piece of family expectations was hard. I mean, when I was applying to college, at one point, my mother said, apply to Yale, live at home, and I'll buy you a car. Primero, like, getting into Yale was that easy, right? That's number one. But then number two, the idea that I was going to leave her house married, she never explicitly said that, but that was, I knew, an expectation of hers as well. And so I had to break barriers. I had to leave those family expectations behind. I had to understand that sometimes in order to move forward, you need to leave family behind for a little bit. And that's not a bad thing, right? You need to be able to do that and manage that. The other thing I will say is fear of jumping into environments that were not created for you and not meant for you often. Environments you might not know how to navigate because you don't necessarily have the social capital that other people have in those environments. So they understand the social cues in ways that you don't, because you've not been around that environment growing up. And then the lack of examples ahead of me. I had Puerto Rican teachers, I had Black teachers, both men and women. I had Portuguese American teachers, right? I had a whole host of very diverse teachers. And I saw those educators, but I didn't see a lot of doctors. I didn't see necessarily a whole lot of lawyers. I saw one or two that I knew. So those things were really critical. And then as I grew in my career, the pressure to get married became a big one. Like, I was a late bloomer. I didn't get married till I was 30. I didn't have my first child at 35. I didn't have my second one till 40. That was a sour point for family, in that I was putting my career first. And until this day, I'm back in school getting my MBA at Yale now, because I think it's important for me to augment my education that I'm doing. And that's still a challenge, that I'm not available at the drop of a hat to run and do something for family when they need something. And that's sort of some of the challenges that I face, but again, not insurmountable. I was able through college and graduate school, with the support of, I'm part of a Latina sorority, So I had other women that were going through the same thing as I was. And so we had that support. So these challenges, while they're challenges, there are opportunities to find your people and to find your kitchen cabinet and your friends to be able to do that. And through those friends and through mentors and sponsors in my career, I was able to overcome those fears and have very real conversations about those fears and be able to be introduced to people who had also made it. So that to me was being able to be open about those fears and challenges led me to meet people that had also experienced that and allowed me to be able to move forward in my career.
I think that when I keep reflecting and thinking about, my journey to this country, so one of the main barriers was language. And if you can tell just by my personality, I love people. Yes, and as a proud Latina, I'm very animated, and I love, connecting with people. So it was very difficult for me when I came to the US, not knowing any word. When I'm telling you that I only knew hello, how are you, it was difficult for me. And then my second sister and I became, with a limited English, the translators, the interpreters, right? So our navigational capital, not only for us, but also for our parents and our two youngest sisters. So that was hard. Both of my parents graduated from Honduras, and later on in my career, I knew that I found out I as a first generation, I'm the first one that went to college, and then my three sisters followed. So that was hard. And I'm going to tell you this: I spent so many hours in the library, working my two jobs, helping my family, going to college. And I love, that Liany and Ellie are, nodding and nodding, because yes, and to learn the language, grasp the concept, taking my classes, because I knew that I want to do that for me, but I wanted to also do it for my parents. And set an example. I'm the oldest too, so imagine that, the oldest, setting the example for so many things, specifically for my sisters. And it is hard. And so I felt for part of my years that I didn't allow myself to rest. I went go all the time. And so that was, one, but also my own aspirational capital, my own dreams to pursue my education. And I have to tell you, similar to Liany, my mom wanted me to be doctora in farmacia. You're gonna be a pharmacy doctor, and I became a doctor in a very different way. But I found my passion. I love higher education. I love working, with college students, and I wanted to continue pursuing that. So I was always only the only one. My cohort in my master's degree, only two of us self-identified Latinas. Then I went in to pursue my doctorate. Once again, there I was, the only Latina in my cohort of 9 of us. And at times, I think one of the barriers, and we did talk a little bit about with Liany and Ellie, it's how I felt that I didn't belong in that space, that people were always questioning my English as a second language, and I didn't know how to defend myself. Now I know that the fact that I speak 2 different languages or more, that we also communicate with my hands, and that I'm very animated, that is part of my cultura. And so, but at some point, right, not me, but the system that I was in made it a barrier. And I decided to dismantle those barriers. And sometimes it's easy, but sometimes we have those systemic, barriers. Mm-hmm. Also, I think what was interesting to me when I came to Connecticut, it's I experienced discrimination, not only from the culture, the dominant culture, but also within my own Latinx community, because I was not Latina enough. And then I was feeling that, wait, what is that? Because I know I'm light skinned. We all know, right? We all know that we came from different, ethnias and diversities and racial groups within our culture. But it was really interesting for me to navigate those spaces as well. And that was another, I think, another barrier was the self-doubt, and at the same time, barriers that the system itself had built, that we continue to dismantle those barriers. But that's a little bit of the barriers I have experienced.
Yeah, and so it's almost like, there's these internal struggles of who we want to be, and who our family and our parents and our people want us to be, these cultural expectations that for some of us first gen, right, we're sort of more difficult to navigate than not. And if I sort of walk us through that journey, I want you to think about, we've sort of gotten outside of that and have sort of fought against, right, the I'm not leaving home because I'm married. This idea that I will be a doctor, just another kind of doctor, or will pursue interest of my own. Let's talk a little bit about this idea of code switching. And I think, Fany, you just alluded a little bit to what happens outside of our family and inside of these either education settings or professional settings. And tell me a little bit more about, when was it appropriate, when was it not, and what we've learned about code switching as we navigate through our careers and our professions.
I think for me, code switching started at a very early age because we exist in two places and spaces at the same time. Having grown up, as I tell people, I did not know that I was anything other than Puerto Rican until I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, right? And so to me, that I was only Puerto Rican, didn't even understand that I was American growing up, right? And so whenever I navigated a school space, even if I had Latina teachers, I had Puerto Rican teachers and teachers from other cultures, it was still a different space than what I was experiencing at home, where, the school lunches were different than what I ate. Like I joke with my daughter now, like they get arroz con gandules, they get pollo guisado for school lunch. Like that did not exist, right? I don't know if it's that great, but it exists now in a way that did not exist 40 plus years ago when I started my educational journey. And so I think it's almost an innate thing that we have, as my friends say, as people of the global majority, we have to sort of work between these two cultures all the time. And so going into the work world, it wasn't so hard to do, but it is very tiring. And I saw someone put that in the chat. It is very tiring because you have to always be on, right? And so I would say that it wasn't the challenge of doing it. It was more the challenge of always having to feel that I'm on. But I don't necessarily think that knowing how to code switch is always bad or that it's a bad thing. I think it gives us a strength in many situations because it allows us to be able to empathize and understand with people. I have found that my ability to code switch has in many ways helped increase my social capital within organizations that allows me to bring up others with me. When I came into the Department of Health here in Hartford as the director, I looked around and I said, who do we serve? But what does our staff look like? And we had very serious conversations. And I was able to go switch between those conversations with HR and the unions and those kinds of things because I knew how to navigate in different worlds. And I knew how to be myself, being that first generation, Puerto Rican little girl growing up. Having the humility to know when I needed to be humble, having the gravitas when I knew that I needed to pull that out. And so it's not always necessarily straddling sort of the majority of what we've referred to as white culture in the business world. Sometimes it's also straddling code switching on terms of humility and when to pull up the gravitas when you need it. So I know that oftentimes that code switching gets a bad rap, but I think it's important to know that it's useful. It's a skill. Mm-hmm. And it's a skill that when you learn how to do it well, you can help bring others along because you gain credibility in your organization. And as I tell people, I'll use it and then they get to know me and the level of code switching that I necessarily have to do tends to go down. And so it becomes an easier place to work with in terms of the fatigue that you feel sometimes when you have to code switch a lot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think as I've grown in my own career, I've learned that it is about gaining influence as well as sharpening your skills, showing up with excellence. Those are the factors that really help us to not only get ahead, but be able to help others get ahead as well. So whenever I'm asked about code switching, I like to use a different phrase. I like to call it artful navigation. And that's because as Latinas, we are bicultural. we live and we work in two worlds, and this is not a liability. I think when we see it as a liability, and especially when we're entering corporate spaces for the first time, it can be exhausting. I know, because I also felt exhausted for quite some time. But when I realized that it was my superpower, which means it's also all of your superpowers, when I started to own my bicultural identity, and I didn't see it as a liability, I saw it as, this is who I am, this is all of me. I began to see that I had the ability that not everybody else has in majority culture, right? I had the ability to read a room, understand multiple perspectives, and also adjust with skill and with grace. And that's all artful navigation. And we all, as Latinas, have the ability to do that. But there's one very important part, our cultural identity and our commitment to authenticity should also not become what I call the escape hatch. And I'm saying this because I coach Latinas, especially young Latinas who are just starting out in their careers. And one of the challenges that they often have is that they want to be authentic in the workplace, especially the younger millennials and the Gen Zers. And what is authenticity, right? How do we define authenticity? We all come from very different Latino backgrounds, and wanting to bring that into a corporate space or an organization, how much of that do we have to give up? How much do we have to conform to whatever's happening around us? Those are real issues that we have to grapple with. And one of the things that I always talk about is, it's not about authenticity in the workplace as much as it is about showing up with executive presence, right? We want to be professional when we show up. We need to be able to earn our place at the table. We want to be at the table, and earning that respect will mean that we will have to show up in a certain way. And that doesn't mean that we have to give up our authentic selves. It just means we might have to moderate the authentic self a little bit in order to navigate that space more creatively and more artfully. That's where the term of being artful and navigating that space comes in. So don't ever use this desire to bring your authentic self as an escape hatch. Really think about it as a superpower. You have the ability to navigate these different spaces. And authenticity doesn't have to mean that being casual about how we carry ourselves. It means bringing the fullness of who we are, all while demonstrating professionalism and the respect that earns us the influence at the table. So yes, let's embrace our Latinidad fully, and let's see it as a superpower. And let's also use that superpower to bring our best selves forward in every space that we step into.
Yes.
I completely agree. I think that the piece that I would add to what Liany and Ellie have shared is, for me, what was interesting in my journey is that I did assimilate, right? So I came to the country, I wanted to assimilate. I'm going to give you a clear example. So I never corrected folks in my first time in 10 years of living in the US, how to pronounce my name. At home, my family would call me Fany or Fanita, bien hondureños. But then, like when I came to Massachusetts, so people would say Fany. And I never, corrected them. I just wanted to fit in. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be part of that. And then, in my younger self, right? So Fany and her younger self was assimilated. Something happened to me when I came into my master's degree program, when one of my professors gave the power back to me. And when she called me in our first class, she said, Fany, I see that you have a thought. And obviously I said my thought in the class. But when she called me Fany, it's like immediately I reclaimed my identity and I said, yes, I'm Fany. I'm Fany DeJesús Hannon. I kept my middle name because my mother made a promise to Jesus, her firstborn, that she was going to name, whether, boy or girl, Jesus. So I kept my middle name. And then I love my husband and now I'm Hannon. But Fany, when that's how folks, call me, right? They call me Fany. That's my name. And I think that in my years, as I enter in my 30s, and I'm 50, by the way, I'm very proud of that because I know I don't look it. So, but I'm very excited, very happy that I'm 50 years old now. So in my mid 30s, late 40s, that's when I learned a little bit more about the work of Tara Yoso with cultural wealth And I started embracing that. And to Liany's and Ellie's point, it is a superpower to do code switching, to know that we are bicultural, that we speak so many different languages. But I have to tell you this, the students in PERLAC, they always knew that I meant business when they were seeing me suit up, right? They would always tell me like, Fany's gonna be meeting with the trustees today. She's meeting with the higher up administrators. Yes, because I will say to them, I'm suiting up, I'm in business today. There's some spaces that I knew I needed to be there with my own Latinidad, right? With my own authentic self. But I knew that in that space, I needed to be suiting up, which that is happening today, everybody. I'm gonna have some other meetings. But I wanted to mention that because I believe in the power of role modeling for our, for our younger generations. But I truthfully agree with Ellie and Liany that we can be our authentic selves, but also understanding that there are spaces that there are norms when it comes to be professional. And it doesn't mean that you're going to sacrifice who you are. But for me, that's when it comes. I mean, now I embraced being, like this biculture, this superpower. I gave a list of words when I came into this role to my teams. I have 4 units reporting to the Dean of Students. And I was very intentional to let my teams, I am a Latina, I am Hondureña. When I say buenos dias, this is what I mean. When I say these phrases, this is what I mean. And it's very important that you all know, that my teams know, that I'm always thinking about us as a collective. And I'm very proud of that. And I will continuously own it. So now I have created, a phenomenon here that many of my team members, they're going back, to take their Duolingo classes in Spanish or, from high school. And it makes me happy, right? So it's like, great. Of course, it's still there in your brain. But those are some of the aspects that I think, us as a Latinas in the work that we do, we bring forward to our organizations and institutions.
What quickly came to mind for me was eso se pega, right?
Eso
It's
se pega.
contagious.
Sí, yes.
It's contagious, right? That when you own who you are as a person and you own it enough to share it, then we interest others in who we are and what we do and everything else. We're gonna start to wind down because I do want to leave a few minutes for questions and answers. But I do want to sort of think about, a part of PLF's work is always to build a pipeline for leadership and to bring in young leaders. And so what are your thoughts on how we engage, how we inspire, and how we talk to the next generation about this work that we've done? I think the undertone in all of your responses today is, you stand firm in the work that you do, but you continue to give and you continue to give, right? And that there are others that you mentor, others that you sponsor, and that's sort of a two-way. And so when you think about our younger leaders, let's talk a little bit about them and your work in that space.
I think it's always important to help young Latino leaders, Latina leaders, Latine leaders, Latinx, to understand the space that we're operating in so that they understand what the mission is, right? We have to give them a sense of being mission driven. I'm very committed to helping women get ahead, particularly Latinas. And, when I think about what some of the studies tell us, right? Back in 2023, we saw that Latinas working full-time year-round were earning 58 cents for every dollar that's paid to a white non-Hispanic man. And if you include all workers, looking at them working full-time, part-time, or part year, the gap is even larger than that. Latinas were paid typically only 51 cents per dollar compared to white non-Hispanic men. And because of that, over a 40-year career, Latinas stand to lose approximately $1.3 million in cumulative earnings. So when I share these statistics, it's to give us a sense of urgency. We're not operating in a vacuum. Maybe you're doing well in your career. Maybe you feel like you're earning a sufficient amount for you. But think about us as a collective. And, one of the things that I've heard also continuously, not only from our fellow panelists, but whenever I enter spaces with other Latina leaders, is they always say, I was the only one in the room. I was the only one at the table. I was the only one in my family, right? We are the onlys. especially our generation, right? Generation Xers, the older millennials, and we tend to be the onlys, the boomers, right? So we're the ones opening the doors for those who are coming behind us. So understanding the full picture and understanding what it means, not just for ourselves as individuals, but what it means for our community and for our future leaders, the space that we're operating in, that there's a lot at stake here, that we have not come into our full leadership potential yet as a community, and it still stands to be there. It helps us to wake up every morning understanding this is not just about my day to day, about my organization, about me dealing with my boss. It's about being mission driven and understanding that I am here not only to sit at the table, but I'm here to bust that door open for the people that are coming behind me. Mm-hmm. And that means showing up with excellence. That does mean role modeling for the younger generation and taking time out of my busy schedule to mentor people and to create a robust, for me in particular, because I do a lot of, seminars and webinars, creating a robust curriculum to help women develop the skills that they're going to need to succeed in the workplace, especially given what's happening today with artificial intelligence. If you don't think that there's somebody right now sitting in a room counting your head and thinking about how AI can replace you, think again. It's happening all across the US right now in corporations, not-for-profits, and government alike. So we need to be more strategic about how we show up, not only for ourselves, but for our future. And it's important that we be able to convey that message to the younger generation with a sense of urgency and a mission-driven attitude.
There's a quote from Roberto Clemente that I recently came upon, and I think for me, it kind of summarizes why I do what I do and why I think no matter where you come from, when you're a person, and I'm starting to use the term global majority rather than the terms that we currently use, that there is somewhat of that obligation. And I know it can be a challenge and it's a heavy weight to carry, but I think there is that obligation that we have. And the quote is, anytime you have an opportunity to make a difference in this world and you don't, then you are wasting your time on earth. And so I think, and I'm getting a little emotional because that quote, but I was trying not to be the first llorona here, and here I am. But I think that quote to me, I think about the people whose shoulders I stand on, right? And I think about Willie Matos, Cesar Batalla, Alma Maya, Rosa Correa. These were all leaders in the Puerto Rican community when I was growing up in Bridgeport in the 80s. These folks fought to get magnet schools, desegregated schools, and create magnet schools so that those of us that had the ability to do more and do better, but always with the thinking that we have an obligation to come back. And so I was an aspirante, which was very important to me. And those lessons were really brought it into us, right? And so when I think about that, and when I talk to people and young people, I'm always very open about that you have an obligation, even if it's just one more person, to bring them up. And so for me, it's always, whenever I step into a new space, is trying to identify who is there that has potential, but also leaving my door open for anyone. I mean, I had an open door policy at the city of Hartford. I had an open door policy when I was at the health center as well. Any person, didn't matter whether they were the front desk clerk or they were a project manager, whether they were there 20 years or whether they were there 5 months, I've always told everyone I have an open door policy. What do you want to do? What do you want to be? How do you want to get there? And I remain true to that through COVID. And when we were looking for grants, how do you do this? What do you want to do? Let's talk about that. I'm going to write you into this grant to give you this opportunity, right? And so to me, it's about making sure that you do that and you have that obligation, because somebody opened the door for you, right? Someone always opens the door, whether you know it or not, someone opened the door for you. And so that obligation for me runs really, really deep, that I need to make sure that I keep that door open for anyone else that wants to come in after me. And that can be another Latina, it could be a Latino, it can be an African-American, because to be perfectly frank, my last 2 sponsors have been African-American women. And so it doesn't matter who they are, but if they have an indication that they want to do something good for themselves and for the people that they love and the communities that they love, then it's upon me to find ways to help them to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, the only thing that I want to add is because I wanna hear from the audience, but this is for the youth here. More human connections, less digital interactions. And what I mean by that, I'm very grateful for this. But what I mean by that, lead with curiosity. So now you have three of us here. I'm expecting to see in my inbox emails from you and said, Fany, I would like to connect with you. And because that's what I did. I will go and reach out to people who say, here's my business card, back then, business cards, and will write, I met you at the Networking Career Center event. And I will send an email and say, Dr. Valdez, I would love to connect with you. I just want to hear about your journey. And I'm going to tell you this, people really want to tell you about their journey. So I will connect with Dr. Valdez in California via Teams or Zoom, but I will follow up. So you are the future for our generation, the global majority. I love it. So connect with us, follow through, and also be grateful to your mentors and as well to your sponsors. Because without them, I couldn't have been here either. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. We do have three questions. I think, Fany, you hit on the first one that I see here. Dr. Leon Bailey is asking, can we have a part 2? We knew an hour wasn't going to be enough, right? And this was set up to be a teaser. I was intentional with telling you. It is my hope that you take this conversation, and whether you call Fany or email Ellie or connect with me, right? Find a way to keep this conversation going, because it's one that we can, any one of us can sort of dive in and talk about it. There's a question here. How have you all handled the frailties of white colleagues in a space where you as a minority leader is the strongest expert at the table? It is known, and some make it a point to dim your light. Is there a quick answer that we have to respond to that question? Any one of our panelists?
I think every day when we wake up and we understand that we are going to be interacting with people that don't always share our same background and might not recognize us as the powerhouses that we are, that we need to show up with a level of drive. And we have to also temper that drive with, I'll call it diplomacy and grace, right? I mentioned earlier about our biculturalism being our superpower. Not everyone is bicultural. And because not everyone is bicultural, they don't have the same ability to navigate or even make the key distinctions between groups. One of the things I always love about our community is that we can tell who a Dominican is, a Cubano, Hondureño. We can tell, they're very subtle, right? But if you haven't been exposed to all the different beautiful colors of our Hispanic community, then you're all Hispanic. In fact, you might all be Mexican, right? Because that's what we hear about mostly in the US, right? Everybody's Mexican, right? But we are more cued into those nuances. They might not be. So let's not show up angry. Let's show up with a level of grace and correct, but with a smile. And don't be shy when you're at the table. We need to be willing to speak up, to interrupt, to interrupt when someone's speaking over us. If somebody interjects, then we come back. Right? If we see somebody else sitting at the table who's quiet, especially if it's a woman or another Latina, we say, well, hey, Sally, what are you thinking? Bring the person into the conversation. We can't show up looking meek, tired, defeated. Like I said before, we have to come in ready to bust down the door, but we have to do it with a smile, right? And with grace and professionalism and being friendly and being confident. You have to bring all those pieces of yourself to the table and be prepared that there will be those instances where people aren't going to recognize you as the leader that you are because they don't understand the nuances of being bicultural. But because you do know that, you can go in with a level of grace and, again, artful navigation in order to meet the moment.
We knew if we had more time, we were going to tackle the next question, and that is to talk about the imposter syndrome. And so I don't know if there's anything we could say in 1 minute just to address our audience.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Go, Fany. No, you go. Tu primera, Fany.
Okay, gracias, Liany. So when you are experiencing imposter syndrome, that's when you're going to call your village. That's when you're going to call them. That's when you're going to go see them. That's when you're going to get your energy. I'm going to pass it to Liany because I think she and I have a connecting thought.
That's what I was going to start with, right? And it is It is a struggle. I literally just got a nomination for something yesterday from my college, and I texted my village, and I said, oh my God, I always wanted this, but I don't think I belong. And I got to kick that imposter syndrome's butt right now, right? And so that's 100% what you do. The other piece of that, I think, is I lean into the fact that I know I belong here. Right. And so even though that might be in the back of my mind, because it's natural to have doubts about yourself, right, from time to time. That's how you grow and that's how you learn. If you didn't have doubts about your abilities and who you are, then you're not going to grow as a person, right? So when I have those doubts, I think to myself, what is it that's giving me that doubt? So I try to learn more about that. I think it's really important to have your village. As a professional, I've engaged in coaching, and I'm actually, it's interesting because I deal with the imposter syndrome through the coaching piece of it. But I also, the question about white frailty, it is also a struggle that I'm working with my coach. Sometimes I do it well, and sometimes I don't. And so I think it's okay to be honest about that. But at the end of the day, I know who I am. At the end of the day, I'm the one that's responsible for the decision that needs to be made. And I make that clear in whatever room I walk into, no matter who's around that table. And so I'll deal with the imposter syndrome. I'll deal with the tears later behind closed doors. But we can deal with that. I'm not going to embarrass you, but I'm also not going to let you derail the work that I'm here to do.
Wow. Wow, that was amazing. That was amazing. And if I sum this up as quick as I can, because I don't want us to be cut off without sharing important information, I'll leave you with this. What I heard is be bold. I heard be courageous. I heard be you. I heard look up, because sometimes we feel like we're alone and we are not. And I'll leave you with a quote from Marcia Morales Jafe, who says, being bold is not being reckless. Being bold means pushing yourself to step outside your comfort zone and take calculated risks. If we aspire to transform what is around us, we must first be willing to transform ourselves. Own who you are. Thank you all. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our viewers. Thank you to the foundation and to PLF for making this happen.
Yes, that was amazing. And talk about finding your people, finding your village. I want to thank you all for joining us today for this very important conversation around Latina leadership. A special thanks to all of our panelists and Jadi for sharing your time, your stories, your wisdom, for being those role models that we need and reminding us of the beautiful cultural wealth we all hold within us. So before we close, and I also want to thank PLF and the Community Foundation for this important work that we're blessed to and privileged to do. I want to please ask all of you in attendance to take a few minutes to complete the brief survey that you're going to be receiving following the webinar. Your feedback is invaluable, and it's going to help shape future programs that truly serve our community. I also invite you to support the Progreso Latino Fund during Hispanic Heritage Month. There should be a QR code on the screen. It will support programs like these that will help all of us continue to grow and be inspired. And every gift, no matter how small, helps us sustain this important work. And then finally, please mark your calendars to join us for our in-person program, Seeds of Legacy, Latina Philanthropic Leaders and Their Daughters, on Wednesday, December 3rd from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Q House. Stay tuned for that invitation, and we look forward to hopefully seeing all of you there to continue this vital conversation. Thank you again, and have a wonderful afternoon.